My name is Robin, and I'm a volunteer at A Brighter Way.
And I'm Adam, the Executive Director of A Brighter Way.
And welcome to Conversations About A Brighter Way, where we talk about what it's like for those individuals who've had experience with the criminal justice system.
Call it home, people don't answer, people don't support. They support you when you're there, but when you're gone, they forget about who you was, like you vanished.
Family members, friends, mentors, mentees, mental health professionals, and employees all play vital roles aiding formerly incarcerated people transitioning back into society.
For me, it's turning off the fix-it mode. Patience is really important, and sometimes that's just sitting with somebody, hearing those things that are painful over and over and over again.
The advice I give to any job applicant is to be yourself. I want to get to know you, and I want to hire you and whoever you are. And whatever experiences you've had in the past, you might be able to bring a diverse perspective to our business.
The tagline at A Brighter Way is re-entry through relationships. And in season 2 of our podcast, we delve into those relationships which play a pivotal role in the re-entry process.
Essentially, what we're looking at when you come out of prison is your support group, people, places, and things. If nothing changes, then nothing changes. So if you go back to those same people, that same environment, and doing those same things, you are going to be getting the same outcomes.
And this week, we will be speaking to the relationship you have with your employer. And we will hear from 2 professionals and what brought us all together and what makes them special. We are lucky to have 2 Pauls in the studio, and I will let them introduce themselves. Paul, go ahead.
Sure. I'm Paul Swinney. I work at Zingerman's as the employment specialist. Basically, it means that my job is all about recruiting and hiring for the various Zingerman's businesses here in Washtenaw County.
And how many people are you looking for? You just told me this the other day.
Yeah, right now, for the holidays, we ramp up and we're looking for about 500 people in the next few months here. Typically, we have around 800 to 900 employees. So it's a big jump.
But it is.
And the other Paul?
My name is Paul Hickman. I am the founder and CEO of Urban Ashes. And Urban Ashes was formed in about 2009 as a manufacturer of picture frames and furniture. We grew to, all of the picture frames and furniture are manufactured out of urban salvage and deconstructed wood. And our focus was always working on hiring and providing opportunities for our formerly incarcerated individuals, as well as youth that had had contact with the justice system. So we grew to sell to about 250 retail locations in 42 states. But in 2019, we decided to shut down manufacturing and have now shifted our focus on working with cities to help them build the infrastructure they need to maximize the utilization of their fallen urban trees, as well as tapping into the labor pools that Urban Ashes historically had been supporting our formerly incarcerated and youth.
Okay, so I'm going to ask that hard question right off the bat about what do you do with that felony conviction on a resume? Paul, go ahead.
Well, largely we ignore it. There are certain positions that it matters to us, but for the most part, most of the jobs at Zingerman's, we think it doesn't affect your ability to be a great employee with Zingerman's. When we learn about a conviction, we might ask some questions about it, but largely I think it does not affect someone's ability to get employed with us.
That's great.
I was laughing too because this is like the easiest interview. Paul.
Got to make sure which one you're actually looking at.
I mean, I guess I could go by last names.
No, that's okay.
Okay. And the other, Paul?
In our case, we definitely don't ignore it. We actually embrace it, and it's, instead of a red flag, it's often a green flag for us, where we, as a society, or some businesses you'll hear are ex-felon friendly or formerly incarcerated friendly. In our case, it's a flag out front that we're waving, saying, hey, you've got opportunities here. And as the other Paul said, obviously there are certain cases that we have to be conscious of. Our manufacturing facility, when we shut down, was directly across from a public park, as well as within a block of a public school. That starts to impact who's working at your facility, unfortunately. But that is the law. Otherwise, we were looking for that, actually. So that was something we were sort of 180 degrees. We're looking for folks that have that box checked, even though now that box has been banned in the state.
Oh, that is nice to know.
And let me speak to what you said, too, about the idea of, because I think this is important. important because there is a difference between accepting and embracing. A lot of times people will say, you have to accept this. Acceptance is passive. Embracing is an active, it's an act of expressing your will in some way, shape, or form. And there's been a lot of damage that's been done over the years to individuals who've been sent to places that are listed as felony friendly over the year. I mean, like Amoco. Yeah, you can go drill oil somewhere, but you're not going to work at a local Amoco station because it was individuals that owned these stations. And I think that one of the things that we're trying to put out there is we are talking about people on the other side of this. If you genuinely want people to succeed, it should be kind of like a medical model where you start with do no harm. So I don't send anybody to a place that I don't know is not embracing in some way, shape, or form. I can tell them there's a possibility here, but I'm not going to tell them they're felon friendly. They work. When I say somebody works with us, it's like a stamp of approval. I know that they want our people, and that's hugely important for a population who feels very much unwanted. And that's why we're also taking, it only makes sense. We not only do reentry, but all of us are formerly incarcerated in some way, shape, or form. Jeannie gets the honorary because she did it 8 hours at a time for about 15 years. So if you add it up, but still, like you said, the green flag, I thought it was funny too that the tree guy used a green flag. But the idea of the green flag that here, we are here for you. We want you to apply here because we see your value. And somebody asked me at your event this last Sunday, what are you doing here? What's your interest, in urban trees and wood? And I said, I am about anything that is about recycling, repurposing, and making the best out of things, whether it be human beings or whether it be vegetation.
Yeah, it's funny that I'm very conscious of the correlation between, recycling materials or raw materials or natural resources such as the trees and recycling people, which starts to sound like Soylent Green and things like that. But it's not it's repurposing. It's really the best way, or providing purpose in a lot of cases where there was never any purpose or opportunities provided for them. There's definitely strong correlation. Our crew, pretty much across the board, pretty quickly, once starting to work there, would make comments similar to that. Me working on this wood is like working on myself, that I'm creating a valuable product that society had deemed waste shortly before this. And so in the process of working on this product, I'm working on myself as a valuable asset to society as well.
Paul S., I'm going to ask you this because I think that all of these things kind of align. And one of the things that I've been most impressed about with Zingerman's and its model is it's a conscious community and people buy into it. They feel a part of something. So maybe you can speak a little bit to how you think that might correlate to better reentry and reintegrating people back into their communities to be a part of something.
Well, yeah, I think for many people at Zingerman's, it's more than just a job, that we are a community that supports each other. I was looking at some of our hiring numbers and I saw that actually people that have a criminal conviction in their past, they're more likely to be hired at Zingerman's than someone who does not, which I think talks to, and I like that you rephrase it as embracing rather than ignoring. I think that's right. I think that in the past, we've seen someone with a criminal conviction and we've said, oh, this is someone we want to make sure we give them every opportunity to come in for an interview and, figure out it. And sometimes the job isn't right for that person or, either way. But I think that we give people that opportunity to come in and be a part of our community.
And I know personally, because Paul S., I'm going to do the S and the H. Paul S., we've talked on occasion. And so when we have referred somebody specifically, he wants to know what it is they want to do, what they see themselves doing. It's not just what the openings are. It's how can we match the individual with the openings we have, which is very much like a Brighter Ways strength-based model. Anybody can get a job. One of my favorite definitions of a job is a piece of work. But what you're talking about is a career. And it's a matter of, like you said, the introspective of somebody looking at this piece of wood and realizing how doing this is like internal work. You want someone to get more out of it than a paycheck. And so this buy-in is, we often have to buy into them first and then they buy in. People who feel a part of something as opposed to a part from something have a tendency to invest back into it. It's just common sense.
A couple thoughts here. When you were talking about earlier about the embracing it versus being just friendly to it, it's come to me, and this applies to a lot of things that in society in general that have been oppressed or things that we've done for a long period of time. And I talk about, the comment I have is we can't have equality until we have equity first. And you can talk about equality all you want. If you're already starting at a severe disadvantage, you're never going to have equality without equity. Companies need to go above and beyond what they would normally do for individuals that don't have this in their background to, embrace them and create that equity to get them up to the same level playing field, and then you can have equality from that point on. But you have to level the playing field, and the only way you do that is through equity. And that's being active as a business owner and seeking these individuals out and working with organizations like A Brighter Way and making sure that these individuals get the support they need to get to the point where they can have equality.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think people miss in that discussion too is that idea of diversity. I mean, they don't look at diversity through an equitable lens. And a lot of times they will bring people in and they'll be like, oh yeah, we're diverse, but I want you to act like the last group of people that was in here too, because assimilation is not diversity. The whole point behind diversity is to bring different voices, different experiences to bear so that you can make more equitable decisions as a whole. I went to a training recently and she did a really good job of explaining this. She was working with these well-intentioned people that were working with the homeless. And one of the things they did is for Thanksgiving, they gave them a Thanksgiving dinner. So they gave them an 18-pound turkey and stovetop dressing and everything like that until they got somebody on their board who had been homeless and said, I don't have a home, let alone an oven, let alone 15 hours to cook an 18-pound turkey. And so that's the idea of bringing people in to have these conversations so that you can make the most equitable decisions. And equity is one of those things that people get confused, sometimes, but I love the picture of there's 3 boxes, and depending on the height of the individual, the one person doesn't need any, the one person needs 1, and the one person needs 2, and then they're all at the same height. Seeing that, some people not only need more, but they deserve more because what they have been given historically. They're behind. They are behind. They have not had a fair shot. And so it's about bringing us to the point where we can start working on equality. And I love the way that you put that out there. Did you have something, Paul S.? I see you nodding your head.
Well, I agree with what I'm hearing. So I'm just nodding along to what you're laying down. I think as far as additional supports for returning citizens and our community in general, we have something that we call Community Chest, which is available to all staff that may apply specifically for these folks, where let's say their car breaks down and they don't have the money to fix it. We will either pay for that or give them a loan. We'll work out something based on their situation. They're having trouble paying rent for a specific month. And so I think that just goes to sort of the holistic picture that a job is a big part of getting back on your feet, but there might be other supports that are necessary. And hopefully we are doing our best to try and add those supports.
So I also work for Zingerman's, and it is such a community to work there, and the welcoming of everybody and the education that Zingerman does to make sure that you are up to speed and what you know, right? They don't want you to fail. They want you to succeed. Plus, their food is amazing.
Get no argument out of me. I went to the Zingerman's donated a visioning training to us, and I got amazing training. I got amazing bread and an amazing meal every day, and I got a massage. Where in the world? I mean, that's like utopia or something. So
on to the next question. What are your advice about how to do a resume from someone that's just recently released from incarceration?
Yeah, that's hard. I don't know what the right answer is, because I think it's going to depend on the employer. The advice I give to any job applicant, and this is both your resume and when you come in for an interview, is to be yourself. Don't try to create or reinvent yourself for the job, because ultimately, if I meet you today and you're one way, and then 2 days from now when you start, you're a totally different person, then we're both in a bad situation. So I think it applies here as well, that I want to get to know you, and I want to hire you and whoever you are. And, going back to the topic of diversity, whatever experiences you've had in the past, you might be able to bring a diverse perspective to our business. And so I would say be upfront.
It's dangerous to ask me that question because I don't look at resumes at all as an employer. And that got started from somebody I worked with was hired, pretty soon out of college. I was hired by someone that I asked about 2 months in. I said, "You never looked at my resume or my portfolio." And I asked him, "How the hell could you hire me?" And he said, "I sat down and talked to you and got a pretty good idea of who you were. And you were going to sink or swim pretty quickly. And I'm going to find out and you're still swimming." So I've kind of adopted that mantra as a hiring model for myself. I've done a lot of, in particular with A Brighter Way, worked with some of their folks shortly after they've come home and helped them develop a resume. They'll have resume that they got help from somebody along the way, either, as they're coming out of the prison or if they're, connected with a social service of some sort. But typically what I'll see is just a really straightforward black and white, no personality, and often doesn't say anything about their history while they were on the inside. And obviously, particularly those who've been inside for a long time, have incredible experiences that are applicable to the outside. And as the other Paul said, that that's going to come out. And so I'd rather know who you are up front. And so when I'm helping somebody write a resume, that's my whole focus, is finding out who they are, what's their style, what do they look like, or what do they want this to look like, how do they want to present themselves. It needs to be an extension of themselves as opposed to what somebody else thinks it should be. So I'll get into the whole style of things, and I'm asking them, what type of clothes do you like to wear, what kind of music do you like, because that starts to tie into everything else, and then developing that resume to represent them the best. And then I'll also start digging in specifically into their work while they were incarcerated, because at least what I've found, a lot of the folks I've worked with, they don't consider that viable, or somebody's told them that, or whatever it is. And, they've had to deal with obviously a job that has substantially more challenges probably than most jobs on the outside that come along with it. And that's of value. And so really kind of digging deep into the individual and finding out, what accomplishments they have and really showcasing those. Even if it's not work related, whatever it is that this person has done that really shows who they are deep down, that's where I'll really push to help them, on their resume. That's what would be of interest to me. And for the most part, I've heard, pretty good responses on the resumes I've worked on. But for me personally, like I said, I don't look at resumes. So I want to sit down and talk to them.
I think it's like any other relationship. That's why we're framing this in the form of relationship. When you turn in a resume or an application, how many jobs are you trying to get? One. How many are you going to get paid for? I'm asking the employers now, because if you guys are going to pay for two, I might
consider
one.
Right.
I'll cut to the chase.
Right. So it's one. And if you're not representing who you are, then you're going to end up doing two jobs, because you're going to do what the job requires you to do, and then you're going to do what your resume required you to do, which is possibly be somebody who you weren't in the first place. The same thing happens in regular relationships. As you get into relationships and everybody puts their best foot forward, and then they have to either tiptoe around certain issues, or they have to change who they are to continue on in that relationship. It's easier to just kind of be who you are and let things fall where they may. I came out and I was 30 for 30 on interviews. Everybody offered me a job and did not hear exactly what I was saying about my being formally incarcerated. Some of them thought I was a corrections officer because my resume looked so good, because I knew I'd worked. What do you mean I haven't? A functional resume is about what you can do. You don't have to put these time gaps on it. What time gap? I worked for all 27 of those years. And so I did like anybody else. I did euphemistic language. I didn't put that I was a programs clerk, because I wasn't. I was a programs director. I did everything for those programs, and everything I listed on there as a strength was the absolute truth. So you end up where you're supposed to. You end up at a Zingerman's. You end up in front of a Paul. And eventually you're going to end up where you need to be. I ended up in front of the 3 major jobs that I've had since I've been home. I've been in front of the chairman of the board, and I've been in front of the 2 people who started the organizations, and they hired me because they saw who I was and that I would be an asset. And I think that's ultimately where you want to be. You don't want to just get a job. We do want to get a job to get from point A to point B. But remember, if the difference between your interviews for your job and your interview and resume for your career.
So, Paul, you talked a little bit about the interview. What about advice about the interview, how to relax, or how to put your best foot forward?
How to relax is hard. I think having some self-awareness and practicing an interview is always good advice so that you're ready. When I talk to candidates, I say, like a political candidate, you need to have a platform, and you need to make sure that you've got these 1 or 2, 3 things that you want to make sure that you're communicating during an interview, whatever that is. Let's say someone's interviewing at Zingerman's Bakehouse, and maybe you want to get across that, man, I love to bake, I love being part of a team, and I show up on time. Let's say those are the 3 things that are going to be my platform to get hired today. And hopefully those come out in the questions that are being asked by the interviewer. But if not, at the end of the interview, I would say, thanks so much for having me in. Really excited about this opportunity. And as you've probably learned from me, I love to bake. I'm a great team member, and I always show up on time. And I can't wait to hear back from you. So just making sure that you're reaffirming all those positive things about you that you want to make sure you get across.
Great advice.
And then you better love to bake. You better show up on time and be a great team player.
It needs to be true. Absolutely. And again, that goes to being your authentic self because, and again, going back to diversity, every single person is unique. And it sounds sort of corny, but everyone is a unique person and everyone brings their own unique perspective. And so you should bring that to the interview from day one and throughout your employment.
I'm going to agree with pretty much everything Paul said. One thing I'll add to it is I do highly recommend, like I heard when I walked in here today, I net stalked you or dug you up on the internet and to see who you are and what you're about. Know what the company is about and what they stand for, what they're interested in, what that whole business is about. And you need to, if this is not just a job for you, that this is a career thing, that it obviously has to match with some of your interests and, make that connection like Paul was saying. But do research on the company. And when you show that to the employer, it shows that you are very interested. Don't walk in blind about what the company does, what their history is. You don't need to drop, a million, hints that you've dug a lot, but, having a good understanding of who that company is and what drives them, I think is very important.
Yeah, I heard something that, me, and there are certain sayings that I think that do more damage than they do good. And so we've heard this saying a million times that if you do something you love, you never work a day in your life. I think everybody in this room will call bullshit because you do work and you work harder. But what I read was you work harder, but the tools are lighter in your hand. And so I think if you're doing something that you genuinely, you don't even have to love it. You have to enjoy it. It has to be a part of who you are. There has to be something more than a paycheck behind it. I think that's the beauty of the Zingerman's model. Is the Zingerman's model is not so much, they have a diversity of businesses, so there's a lot of different strengths that you can tap into. But I think the beauty of it is that half the people that are probably working there are not necessarily working there because the thing they're doing is the thing they've always thought about doing. It's because they became a part of something and they're doing something bigger than the job as a whole. You guys represent something other than amazing bread.
Well, so many people that work there started somewhere in the company and have moved to another part of the company and maybe several iterations of that and have been there 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. The other thing that's unique is that we've got 229 owners as of this week because we allow staff to become part owners of the business. And we just announced that we're widening that. Our 2 founders, Ari Weinsweig and Paul Saginaw, who have been here for 40 years. And I don't know how old they are, but they are old enough to start to consider, I'm not going to be here forever. What am I going to do with this business when I'm no longer a part of this business? And they shared that their plan is to transfer ownership to the employees of Zingerman. So to me, it's even a better time to get involved in this company.
At a certain age, all you have to say is old enough to have been around for 40 years in the business.
Yeah, that's right.
So what about the relationship with the employer and employee? How could the employee make it better? What advice do you have for them?
I'll go first on this one. This is a really hard one. And this is coming from somebody who was a project manager, a production manager, for other companies. And, it's always that, you want to have a tight relationship with your crew, but at what point is too tight? You become too close of friends. Is it a problem? Does it become a problem? That's always a really big challenge for me because I'm a pretty outgoing and social person. I've become pretty good friends with all my crew. I always have. It's been detrimental sometimes. And usually, where occasionally I've been taken advantage of in that realm. But for the most part, it hasn't stopped me from doing it. So in that context, I guess it would be, sharing, coming from the employee side, again, finding out a little bit and not getting sort of creepy, but finding out who your employer is and what's their personal interests and talking to them about that and sharing your personal interest to them, opening up that this is beyond work. This is, who I am, and sharing that. And I think that's important to know more about individuals and who they are and what they are beyond work. You only get a small snippet during the day. And so I think an employee showing that interest in whether it's their manager or, it's easier when it's sort of a lateral employee talking to them and getting to know them, but getting to know management, who they are. They're not just the one overseeing you. They're another person that's got a whole other life also and dealing with crazy things as well. And so looking at them with some empathy and trying to understand who they are and where they're coming from and showing interest in it. Because if you don't do that, you can't really expect others to, give that back to you. And this is something I like to say. Calvin Evans was the first employee we ever hired. And it was a few years in, and Calvin asked me, I asked him, what point did you start trusting me? He said, as soon as you started bringing your kids in. And that showed that I trusted bringing definitely the most close thing to me to them and sharing it with them created a tremendous amount of trust. And so I think that opening that up, it goes both ways. So, opening up your life to your bosses, so to speak, as I do the air quotes, I think would be beneficial. So they don't look at you as just, the person working on the assembly line or whatever it is.
Great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, I think in the same vein of communication and, sort of sharing your hopes and dreams. So maybe not on day one, you need to establish yourself as a new employee, but having an open line of communication to say, boy, this is an area of the company that I'm really interested in, so that when opportunities arise, people are more likely to sort of send those your way and say, hey, did you notice that marketing position opened up or that accounting position opened up or whatever? And also, are there trainings that I can help support so that when that job does open up, you're ready to be the first candidate in line internally? I think employers always want to hire people internally and develop their people. You end up with more well-rounded perspective within the company. So I think being really open about what your hopes and dreams are is super important.
I think asking for feedback is important too. So if you ask them for feedback, they know that you value it. I used to have this discussion with people on the inside all the time when they would talk about the rules and the oppressive nature of it and stuff. And the fact is, when you become self-disciplined, when you become your first line of management is you, the next line of management doesn't have to do as much, and they don't have to impose as many things on there. When we aren't disciplined, the system is set up to discipline us. So I think one of the best ways to kind of stand out with an employer, and now that I do some of the hiring and I have been in a supervisory role, is what I'm looking for somebody I don't have to follow around behind all the time. Somebody that is self-motivated, somebody that is invested in building what I find to be valuable, which is what we're doing. I'm trying to bring people on to a brighter way that not only can mentor and they can do all right for 40 hours a week, but they can help build this into something that changes the way we do reentry, that goes to quality of life as opposed to recidivism. I told my brother this. My brother was asking certain things when he was dating, and I said, stop trying to impress people and just work on being impressive. And I think that kind of happens naturally, and other people will see it if you're doing the sharing. If you're bringing your kids in so they can see you on a regular basis. In a recent podcast, we were talking about the idea of one of the reasons why I show up, one of the reasons I do all these things, one of the reasons why I put these things out here is there's a level of accountability. I say what I say because I want people to call me if my feet don't match my mouth. And I think if you tell a manager that, or if you tell somebody you're working with, give me that feedback, let me know. It shows that you're invested and want to be the best employee and partner in a way, because you're not just an employee, you're a partner, you're invested in it.
So I am thinking about the population of those formerly incarcerated, and they have a hard time maybe asking for help, and they might also have a hard time getting that feedback. So Adam, what advice do you have for people? Like, feedback is not bad, especially at Zingerman's. I have to tell, we get feedback all the time, and we get it from our managers, but we also get it from our coworkers too. And it's never to hurt or to embarrass you. It's more like, did you know this? just letting you know this is how it should be done. I get feedback, and sometimes it can be hard. So what advice do you have for people to accept that feedback or to allow it to sink in?
I recently did a leadership training with Just Leadership USA, and one of the things that I took from it was feedback is just feedback. When you realize that, it changes things. It's not even about you. It's only about how you landed. It's only about how a message landed with somebody. It's not, we've had another one of these sayings, criticism, constructive and destructive criticism. It's not even criticism, it's feedback. When you ask for it, it changes the way the discussion goes. I also think, since it was a leadership program, that I should add this, that we're all leaders. Even when you come into an organization and you're trying to get hired, you still want to be a leader. You're not trying to come on as a follower. So lead how you're going to respond to feedback and give them that opportunity. One of the things that I try to do personally with, my guys is, what can I do better? This isn't just a matter of what can you do better? What can I do better? Because I can always do something better. So we have meetings every week and we sharpen things, and you have to treat everybody different. I can't treat Rick the same way that I treat Q. They've got different strengths. So I would just say that feedback is just feedback. Welcome it instead of trying to hide from it, because you can learn from it. Doesn't mean all feedback is equal, because some people are just destructive by nature and they don't care about building you up. But at least if you welcome the feedback, you learn who is who and you can differentiate between the two.
Well, and I like to prepare applicants. That's part of sort of the initial phone call that I make, is that we're a place that is going to bury you in feedback, and we hope it's a good thing and we want you to take it as a good thing. But yeah, sometimes when you hear feedback that feels like criticism or feels like it's personal or something, that can be hard for someone to take. So I think putting it out there that we are going to share information, making sure you're okay with that. And I love what Adam said about saying to a leader, I'm willing to get feedback. Do you have any feedback for me? Because even the best people managers sometimes struggle and maybe hang on to feedback because they're not sure how to say it, or they don't want to disrupt the apple cart. And sometimes having that staff member come forward and ask for it, or sort of establish that they are open to that feedback, really changes the relationship in a really meaningful way and allows that transfer of information to happen in a positive way.
I think it also gives you the opportunity to kind of evolve that relationship, because sometimes if I open that door, then it also creates an opportunity later where I can say, are you open to some feedback?
That's right.
Yeah.
It works both ways at Zingerman's. It does. Paul, do you have any?
I don't really have anything to add to that. From the employee side, from the sort of management or ownership side, I've always, in teaching in general, and anytime giving feedback, I try to go to great lengths to explain why this is this way, explaining to them why that rule was created or that guideline or instruction or whatever, or technique, whatever it is, why it was created, how we got to that point, and why it's better than everything else we know to this point. And so then what that does, it starts to instill into that individual an understanding of that it's not just A, either arbitrary, or B, it's punishing me kind of thing. It's there for everybody, and it's there for all these specific reasons, and it benefits the product in the end, or whatever it is. And then what that also does is it starts to educate your staff to really understand what's driving your company, and then they can start to see, hey, this was created to address this issue, and then they can potentially come back and say, hey, I got another idea that would address that even better, or something like that. It gets them to start to really understand what's going on with the company, and they can potentially add to that, which is, your company is the best way for your company to grow. You're only as good as your people. Really, if Zingerman's bread was as good as it is, and the whole people thing was a nightmare, I don't think Zingerman's would be around as long as they are. So it's very much about people. I don't care what your product is. That's a critical part. Coming from the sort of the other side of that. Yeah,
the product's always people. I mean, it was hard for me to get my education while I was in prison because the Pell Grants were gone. So this idea that you get a free education and stuff in there, not during the period that I was there. They had it for the first 6 months, and then they had it for the last 3 years. And the rest of it, I managed to get my degree piecing together, secure PAC funds.
You mean you couldn't finish your degree in 6 months?
No, I couldn't. I probably really could have if I really buckled down. But the whole thing about it is like, what am I gonna major in? And that was my realization, is it doesn't matter what you do, people are associated with it. So I ended up getting my degree in psychology because the school I went to didn't have one in sociology. I find groups far more interesting than individuals. But that in philosophy. And I think if we take this philosophical approach to everything, the holistic approach, as you were talking about, then these things allow you to ask those kind of questions. So if you give me the information of this is in place because of this, the next time I approach something, it isn't arbitrary. It isn't about me. I wonder what the reason behind this is. And so you get people to do critical thinking and find the things that the company can do better.
Yeah, what he said.
Yeah.
Okay, one final comment from you guys. So what about those who are recently released? What kind of advice when they're looking for a job that you can give them?
Call me. I've got a job opening. I want to talk through what might be the right job for you. The bottom line for me is that we are just really bought into the idea that we're a community-based business. We're a better business when our community is strong. And this is one way that our community can be stronger, because obviously if you're just released, one of your real challenges is having some income so you can kind of get your life back going. And so a job is such a huge part of that. And we want to be part of that resource that helps people. So call me.
That's great.
That's my advice.
What's your phone number?
Can I put it on here?
Absolutely.
Well, the easiest one is you could email me jobs@zingermans.com. That's my easiest email address. 734-468-4662 would get to my desk at work.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
What would I recommend? And I just had this conversation recently with another Brighter Way person who's doing some work with me. You have to be willing to do, and I got to say this carefully and sort of hear me out all the way through, because there can be some sort of misconceptions maybe on the front end of this. You have to be willing to do just about anything, especially when you're starting out, regardless of, I'm speaking from personal experience, when you're in a tough spot and can't find work, you have to be willing to take almost anything and look at it as stepping stones and not as a barrier. But on the flip side of that, so there's not the misconception here, take incredible pride and notice as to who you are and how valuable you really are and what you can bring to this. So I don't mean settle for that, but you have to often have to start there and be okay with it, but always don't let it get you down. That's like, okay, that's one step. And, I got one step going, and now my eyes are open for, what's the next one? And moving through there. And that could be within the same company. Ideally, go do search for what interests you while you're doing that. Obviously, we all have to eat and pay bills. And unfortunately, those who are, especially when they first come out, have huge amount of debt, thrown on them immediately. So getting that somewhat under control, I think, will open up a lot of things, and then focus, what do I really want to do here? Don't settle for, and I don't think, at least most of the folks that work for us that did some serious time, they're pretty damn focused on what they want to do for the rest of their life, because they've lost half their life. But it's a hard challenge between accepting, what do I need to do just to be able to eat, and be okay with that. You've got some good things going, and don't let it get you down, but then always stay focused on, ultimately, what's the end goal here, that I want to have this career in this, and I am very valuable at this, and continually working at it. Myself, especially moving around from state to state and somewhat to career, a lot of people would look at me and go, you got a really crazy career line. And to me, they're all just related, because they're all part of me. So look at it that way. It's just another step in your process. Don't let it get you down. Ultimately, do what you've got to do, and be accountable, and be disciplined in this, and that this is you're starting, whether you have a job. Actually, this is probably my best advice for anybody. When you're looking for a job, you start working at 8 o'clock in the morning. You punch clock, literally or virtually. And you do that yourself every morning, starting to look for a job. I'm going to work from 8 a.m. till 5 or more. Am I going to put in overtime? But you do that every single day until you get to where you need to go. And I used to do that when I'd move somewhere. I'd go sit down and, I'd work for those 8 hours or 9 hours, no matter what, until I got something. And one of the other things is when you walk into a meeting, when you first meet with somebody, you may discover that, okay, this isn't the job for me, and there's not a connection, they're not hiring, but make it your goal to walk out of there with 2 other connections or 3. That's probably the biggest thing I can recommend, is always have, I'm looking at Adam's shirt, ear hustle. I'd never heard that before until I heard you. And it's like, I've been doing that my whole life. Mm-hmm. Pay attention to what's going on around you. There's jobs nonstop, and don't be afraid to ask about it. Unfortunately, you've got a huge disadvantage, and it's going to take your help to yourself as well. to get out of that, and absorbing every possible opportunity and going after it is critical. But yeah, the ear hustling is.
So Ear Hustle is a podcast from San Quentin.
Is it?
Yep.
I
It's
guess.
an amazing podcast if you guys want to
I guess
listen.
I think I know of the podcast. I guess I didn't remember the name of it, but I've been telling my kids and anybody going to school, I don't care what you go to school for, what you end up wanting to do. It's all about networking. It's again back about people and building that network. You'll find your job, your career, should I say?
Let me piggyback to Paul's too and give you an example of what he's talking about, it's kind of get in where you fit in. One, it's easier to find a job when you have a job. The other thing too is you never know. The whole purpose behind any job, I think, is to make yourself, in one regard, irreplaceable, and also make yourself completely replaceable, because a good leader creates other leaders and they can do that. But the other thing too is nobody wants to let you go. And my first real job paid $14.50 an hour. It was part-time, and I got a better job and I moved on, but I made such an impression that they came back to me and paid me $40 an hour to do the same job in a consulting role. So you never know what you're going to do by simply just showing up and doing your best. And I would also say, following the other Paul, call Paul, because that's it.
I thought it was Better Call Saul. Well, that's Paul. There you go.
Exactly. I love this. I don't have to Paul. Exactly. So call Paul, and that is a part of the networking. Networking takes place in many areas. It takes place when you walk into a room, but it also takes place when you listen to something like this, because this could have been something that you were just curious about and not sure, and all of a sudden you've got a job lead. Finally, of course, I have to say, if you're in Washtenaw County, contact A Brighter Way, because A Brighter Way is all about networking. It's all about reentry through relationship. So if you're not sure, then come with somebody who has some of those connections, and then you can start to make them from there. That's all it is. It's all about people, and it's not that different than the yard. When you walk onto a yard, you don't know who people are, and you start to ask a few people that you trust. You can trust those of us at A Brighter Way. We've been where you've been.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
This
you.
has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The Pauls.
The Pauls. This is the Paul Squared episode.
Thank you for listening to Conversations About a Brighter Way, Reentry Through Relationship, and spending some time getting to know a little bit about other humans.
We'd like to thank some people that helped to make Conversations About a Brighter Way possible. We'd like to thank our volunteer podcast editor, Patrick Domingo. You heard him in season 1 as well. Patrick is a multidisciplined artist based in Arizona. For contact information and to view their work, visit their website, patrickdomingojr.com. The beautiful music you hear in the intro and thank yous was written and performed by Chelsea-based singer-songwriter Annie Capps. If you're looking for a rootsy vibe, a touch of twang, and a soulful groove, look no further. You can find her at anniecaps.com. We'd like to thank Grove Studios for the discount for our podcast, our individual donors, United Way of Washtenaw County, the Ann Arbor Thrift, Nation Outside, Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, our volunteers, mentors, and mentees. The contact information for A Brighter Way is info@abrighterway.org and 734-896-3770.
Oh, and wait, subscribe and follow us on social media so you don't miss out on a single episode. And visit the website abrighterway.org for donation opportunities. And if you want to reach out to ask questions or send comments, you can email volunteering@abrighterway.org. This is Robin.
And this is Adam.
Peace out.